Crytek is starting to tease things on social media again, which means there is probably content coming down the line. And I have seen some speculation going on in the community that these teases could be pointing us to the next boss. So that's what I want to talk about in today's video, what the next boss could be, what clues we have so far, and maybe what we can speculate from previous updates. Before we hop into that, I want to invite you to answer this question in the comments. What do you want the next boss to be? Remember, Crytek has said over and over again that it won't be a simple animal like a gator or a werewolf, and it seems very unlikely that it will roam freely, but let your imagination run wild. Also, we are almost at 30,000 subscribers, so if you enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe for that future boss reveal. Alright, so what started me thinking about this is this tweet showing what looks like a pretty simple beetle. The tweet reads, "Although not much has been stated about their origin in nature, they are described as a strong and resistant species, and the research notes seem to point at an erratic, unified movement, a so-called hive mind behavior between the beetles and their keepers." It's hard to say if this is the bugs from the hives, but I spent some time translating a few of the words from this image. So we have hive mind at the bottom, erratic movement, sharp protarsis can pierce flesh, the firstborn with a question mark, interspecies communication, and mandibles carry infection. The other words were just too hard to translate. Shout out to the AHA for having 3 letters that look the same. And if that tweet was the end of the story, I wouldn't have thought about it really. But then our lovable Beady Boy tweeted this. He replied, "This is going to be fun," with a devil emoji. So there is probably more to this tweet. And then narrative designer Bree Williams, who you have seen in the dev streams, tweeted this: "None of you are ready, and many will suffer, but like in a fun way." So whatever is happening next in Hunt is probably somehow related to this bug. It might not be boss related. This could be the first tease to the Halloween event, assuming there is one. Maybe that one will be Beetle Moon or something, but I think this is probably our first breadcrumb at something coming in the future. Also, if you read the chapters of the Serpent Moon event, our heroes end up trapped in a mine, locked in the dark with something described as follows. There was someone, something in the mine, deep, trapped, keening with grief and rage. And then later in the chapter, that something is described as female and having a piercing wail. Shout out to Toxic Pancake 88. He has a video covering this in a bit more detail, and you should definitely subscribe to him too, especially if you are on console or you enjoy the Cliff Notes version of patches and DLC drops. Really, it's a great channel. Anyway, so that description sounds like a hive a bit, but I doubt there would be a cliffhanger where the big baddie is an enemy that can be killed with one heavy attack. So probably not that. We already know that Crytek made a lot of noise about Kingsnake Mine being opened with update 1.9, but turns out there wasn't much in there gameplay wise aside from a few extra pathways, so we can assume all the fuss is about the lore and our next boss or AI will be coming from that mine, maybe as described in the final chapter. Taking that further, going with the description and a tease at some more bug stuff happening, maybe we will get a boss version of the hive in a similar way to how the butcher is just a meathead with extra steps. And I started thinking about what clues we might have for that. So this is probably a good time to remind you that this is all speculation on my part. If translating that picture wasn't enough proof, I have too much time on my hands. So this is me trying to connect dots that might not belong together, but you know, we're speculating here. I've talked about in a previous video how I am always interested in the random things that Crytek tinkers with because it usually indicates something coming later on. As a recent example, Crytek randomly removed the leaderboards from the game and then about a week later announced an event with Mr. Cherry's Hunters, a new type of leaderboard tied to event progress. Thinking back, there were 3 changes that seemed kind of random at the time, but now stick out to me, especially if Crytek was making a hive-inspired boss. So the first one they talked about in the community update video, they improved server performance by reducing the performance overhead of idle AI. That was released in 1.9, I think, maybe 1.8.1, but I find it interesting that they were looking at the AI performance because it might mean they are developing something that requires more resources dedicated to AI, say if a boss was spawning swarms to attack you. And then there was that weird period of time where the bee's logic randomly broke, which rendered hive bombs and hives pretty much useless for a while. So they either changed something that impacted that bit of logic as an unexpected side effect, or they were actually tinkering with that bit of code that drives that behavior. And then the final thing that sticks out, they changed it to where AI aggression triggers at separate times. So now if you walk up to a bunch of grunts, their aggression activates in an interspersed interval rather than all at once, so they won't all stand up at the same time. They said in the dev stream this is to make it feel more natural, but it would also make sense if a boss was spawning things, it would give players a chance to deal with them one by one. So those are three seemingly unconnected things, and they absolutely could be unconnected. I'm sure when I'm wrong, we can talk about how wrong I was, but I never heard much explanation for them other than just performance. But adding to this idea, I feel like a hive-like boss makes sense when you think of the bosses we have so far. The spider moves around super quick and shoots poison clouds. The butcher stomps around like a toddler mid-tantrum and shoots fire. Assassin shoots blades that cause rending damage and bugs that crawl on you. Scrapbeak shoots concertina and drops loot. But if you leave the lair, none of these bosses can hurt you. So a boss that shoots swarms or snakes that track you could add some variety to killing the boss and how you approach that compound. So that's a lot of yarn I am spinning, but the last bit of conjecture here, if Kingsnake Mine from the DeSalle map is connected to the next boss, then other compounds might give us clues too. And if you remember on that east side, there is a bee farm over there, which isn't its own compound, it's just kind of this weird point of interest. And that tweet talks about this hive mind behavior between the beetles and their keepers, so maybe we have an insect farmer coming into play. So there's my big theory with some unrelated ideas jumbled together. There's been some unconfirmed teases that I've seen floated, but I don't really think we should give those too much credit yet. So we will just stick to speculation, and I would love to hear your thoughts. Anyway, until the next video, goodbye.